are monitored 24 hours, 7 days a week by the security staff?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, at this Carrollwood residence, there are no working home phones, are there? Landlines?
That's a good question. I don't remember. I don't remember ever using one.
Would one of the security staff know the answer to that question? You don't know whether the landlines are working?
Objection asked and answered.
That assumes that there were any landlines, so the objection sustained is assumed facts, not in evidence.
What was the protocol that was established in case of emergency? What if one of the kids got sick, for instance? What's the protocol?
If I was there, they would call me and we would call Dr. Murray or whoever Mr. Jackson would like to be called. And if I wasn't there, security would be notified. And they all had Dr. Murray's number. And they would call Dr. Murray or whoever is instructed, 911, whoever they're instructed to call.
So what if one of the children needed to go to the hospital?
Then the security guards knew the route to the nearest hospitals. If they needed to go, security was trained on exactly the fastest route to get there.
If an ambulance came to the gate and you did not know about the emergency, what would be the protocol?
If the ambulance came to the gate, and repeat the question.
Did not know that there was an emergency going on and an ambulance just randomly came to the gate, what would be the protocol for that?
Security will open the gate, go outside, and find out what the situation is.
All right. And the ambulance driver says, well, we got a phone call. What would they do then? What would be the protocol?
Someone will go check to see if that's accurate.
Security would go inside.
Security will call me or they will call appropriate party.
Now, when we talk about the request, when Dr. Murray called you, he requested that security come up and aid him. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you realized it was...
Let me correct that. He said, send someone upstairs. And he didn't use the word security. He said, get someone upstairs.
Well, what did you think he meant by that?
To get someone upstairs.
You didn't think he meant security?
Well, that's who I call. I called security, but he didn't say get security upstairs.
Well, you called Fahim Muhammad, right?
Correct.
He's security.
Correct.
You called Alberto Alvarez.
Correct.
He's security.
Correct.
You called Derek.
Correct.
He's security.
Correct.
Did you call anyone who wasn't security?
Well, your question was, what did he ask me?
Did you call anyone who wasn't security?
No, sir. I called security.
And I'm going to reach over here. Okay. In this picture, we see over here to the right side, this is Exhibit 6, People's Exhibit 6, which you have already identified, right?
Yes, sir.
This is an aerial photo of the Carrollwood residence.
Yes, sir.
Right? And we see in this picture on the right-hand side, over where we see sort of the castle-like, to the right side of the house, we see a white shed. Is that right?
May I use this?
Sure you can. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yes, sir. The trailer right here, or this right here.
Okay. And would you point to
Let's
where
be clear about here and here.
I was asking a question. I'm sorry. Which place are you talking about?
You pointed to the lower left-hand portion of the visible property.
I pointed right here.
All right. And then somewhere a little bit above it, right?
Yes. I'm asking which one.
I think you're seeking clarity in your question.
Right. Where's the security shed?
Security shaft. Oh, thank you. It's right here.
Okay. And where's the kitchen door in relation to the security?
Kitchen door is right here.
About 10, 15 feet away?
I don't want to guess wrong, but it's not far at all. You could. It's right there.
And where was the front door?
Right here.
Now, normally, the security staff is allowed to go through the kitchen and use the restroom. Is that right?
Correct.
And that's the normal entryway for the security staff.
Not at all times. If we have an assignment, usually when they come inside, it's because Mr. Jackson's asking for help. We would always go through the front door.
Well, I didn't ask at all times. I asked, is that the normal route for security staff?
For restrooms, yes, sir.
For restrooms.
Yes, sir.
And when you bring him home from rehearsals, you'll go through the front door and bring his stuff in for him. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right. When we're talking about security, getting somebody from security, We're talking about people that often are right there in that security shed. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Unless
All right.
they're doing a perimeter check.
Essentially, they're right outside the door.
Yes, sir.
One of the statements, actually about 4 times, is that when Dr. Murray called you and left a phone message, he did not say, call 911. We listened to the message. He didn't say that, right?
Correct.
If he had said, call 911, would you have done that?
If you would have told me to call 911, I would have called 911 and tell them to report. If he said to call 911, have them report to the house, I would have done just that and got clarity afterwards.
So you would have gotten a voicemail from Dr. Murray that would have said, call 911, and you wouldn't have called him back?
I would have called him back, but I would have called 911. I wouldn't think he was joking. I would have taken it serious.
Would you have called him back first?
I would have called 911. If he left the message and said, Michael, call 911, have him come to the house immediately, I would have done just that and then called him back.
So you would have done that if he'd left the message?
Yes, sir.
Right? You wouldn't have tried to involve yourself into what was happening first?
Could you...
You would
re-ask
not call and try to figure out what was happening first?
that? As Mr. Jackson's doctor, if he called me and told me to call 911 and have him come to the house, I would have done just
Well,
that.
the question wasn't whether he would call you to tell you that. The question is whether you received a voicemail message telling you to do that.
Objection argumentative. That was not the question.
The
So-
objection is sustained. Re-ask the question, please.
The question is whether you would have done that based solely on a voicemail message from Dr. Murray.
I would have took that serious, yes, sir.
All right, and you would have done that.
Yes, sir.
All right. So when you called Dr. Murray back, you actually spent some time talking to him, trying to figure out what was happening.
Yes, sir.
Right.
And
Okay.
That's the answer.
yeah, okay, yes, sir.
Because you wanted to know what was happening, right?
Yes, sir.
This was an unusual occurrence, right?
Mr. Jackson's called for Dr. Murray before.
Well, was it an unusual occurrence for Dr. Murray to call you and say, we need security right away, we need help? Was that not unusual?
I will repeat, he didn't ask for security. He asked for someone.
Was it a usual occurrence for Dr. Murray to call you and leave a voice to tell you that Mr. Jackson needed help right away? Was that unusual?
That wasn't unusual, but getting a call that day about having a bad reaction, that was the first time that ever happened.
Well,
However,
so-
I have received a call before from Dr. Murray if Mr. Jackson was hurt doing something or he needs medicine. That was normal. So
Well,
that call, okay, yes, sir.
So the only thing that was unusual about Dr. Murray's phone call to you was that he said that he had a bad reaction?
He said he had a bad reaction.
Well, I know what he's...
Yes, sir. He said he had a bad reaction. Get here immediately. And I know myself, I didn't hear it. It's 911. Call 911. Hurry. Something. I didn't get none of that. He had a bad reaction. Come to the house immediately.
So your testimony today is there was nothing unusual about that phone call at all to you?
I never said that, sir.
Well, was it or wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
All right. You had never received a phone call like that before from
Not-
Dr. Murray.
Not in that tone. No, sir.
What tone was that?
The tone that we heard in the voicemail.
Said that had you been to the house earlier that day?
1 a.m. in the morning, I believe the time, or 12 something, when we was dropping Mr. Jackson off after the rehearsal.
Are you normally at that house during the day?
Yes, sir.
It wouldn't be unusual for you to be at that house at 12 o'clock noon?
In the afternoon?
Mhm.
No, sir.
It wouldn't be unusual for Dr. Murray to call you first in the event of an emergency?
Could you re-ask that, please?
It would not be unusual if Dr. Murray were to call you first in the event of an emergency.
Would that not be unusual?
That was my question.
The problem's the negatives and the use of unusual. It could get a little confusing. Could you re-ask, please?
Yes. Would it surprise you? Would it be strange for Dr. Murray to call you in the event of emergency at the house?
First? As
Yeah,
the first
first.
person he calls?
First.
Yeah, if Mr. Jackson's dying, it would.
All right.
To me,
So,
personally.
and it wouldn't be unusual to call you and expect you to be at the house at noon.
He can call me and expect me to be at the house. Yes, sir.
But on this particular day, you were not.
No, sir. I was not at that time.
In fact, one of the things you told Dr. Murray when he called you was, I'm not at the house. I'm not at the Carrollwood house,
I
right?
told him I'm downtown. He asked
Right.
where was I. I said downtown.
The first thing he said was, where are you?
To the best of my knowledge.
All right. You testified that you called Alvarez first, or I'm sorry, you called Fahim first, Fahim Muhammad, and then you called Alberto Alvarez.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you testified that these were the two people who were most familiar with Mr. Jackson. Is that what you said?
Out of the security, yes, sir.
All right. How familiar are you with Fahim Muhammad?
I'm very familiar with Fahim Muhammad.
You've how long?
I would say close to 10 years.
All right. And how familiar are you with Alberto Alvarez?
I knew him a little less, about 5 years or so.
Were they working security for Mr. Jackson in 2008?
Yes, sir.
All right. When did they start in 2008?
Fahim started later in 2008, around Halloween. He was brought in just for a short-term basis. That Mr. Jackson liked him, requested for him to stay. Alberto was brought in early 2008, I guess I'll say.
So Alberto was in Las Vegas the entire time that you were there?
Not the entire time.
Was he in Virginia with you?
No, sir.
So when you say he was brought in, what exactly was he brought in for?
Well, Mr. Jackson, if he didn't like security or if he felt uncomfortable, then he wouldn't hesitate to make himself comfortable and ask for someone to be relieved. It wasn't personal, but people would come in and out, and we needed someone, and Alberto was called to come in.
My question, though, is not why was he brought in, but I tell you that. What was his duties when he was brought in? Was he full-time, or was he there for specific events?
Alberto Alvarez?
Yes, Alberto
in 2008?
Alvarez. Yes.
Full-time while he was there.
Okay, when you say while he was there, you're referring to his when he was at Carrollwood.
In Carrollwood, he came later 2008. He was with us in 2008, then he was gone for a few months, and he came back in later 2008.
And that's what I'm asking about.
Okay, yes, sir.
So he was with you for a short period of time, then he was gone, then he came back. Is that right?
He was with us for a decent period of time. It wasn't short, but he was gone for about a month or so, for a few months maybe, and Mr. Jackson requested him back.
All right. And when he came back, there was an entire shift of the security team.
There was an entire
change in the security team.
The objection is sustained. 350, 352. There's a partial answer. It's 3.
Are you familiar with a security company called Security Measures?
Yes, sir.
And what is Security Measures?
Overall, you may answer.
A security company.
Okay. And they were brought in to provide security to Michael Jackson sometime in 2008?
Overall.
Yes, sir.
And when was that?
They were brought back around when he acquired the property at Carrollwood. They were brought back to do house security.
And were you instrumental in that decision?
Yeah. Well, yes, sir. Instrumental. But Mr. Jackson asked them back because we had a different security company at the time. He asked for their relief and for Security Measures to come back.
And employees of Security Measures was Alberto Alvarez and Fahim Muhammad?
No, sir. They were already with us before.
So neither one of them works for Security Measures?
Fahim Muhammad, I'm not saying that they haven't done work for them in the past, but they weren't on Security Measures payroll.
When you left the hospital,